Give me money, give me money, give me money, give me money, give me money.
You know, sometimes I think about my life and the decisions I've made, and I often wonder what event started the domino cascade that's currently ended with making a serious video refuting the stubborn insistence that Elsana was intentional. This is my fucking job. My God. This is my job. This is my career. This is what I do for a living? Where did my life go so wrong? I think I should preface this by saying that I absolutely love this movie. It remains one of my favorite movies of all time and was the movie in the Disney project I was most looking forward to. I need to say this because I'm about to rip it to pieces for my and everyone else's amusement. Frozen is, for me, patient zero on why the push to find metaphor in everything is ultimately a faulty one in many cases. It's clear that Frozen is about exactly what it says on the tin, familial love. It's not about anything else beyond that. Oh, but good lord, if you were around in late 2013, you'd be baffled at the kind of shit people were spewing about this film.
Elsa's big first, snowgasm. Sorry, but it's kind of hard to miss the coming-of-age metaphor in this case.
The dominant opinion about Frozen is that Elsa's story is one big coming-out metaphor, that Elsa's having a metaphorical gay awakening symbolized through her fear and self-hatred, and how repressing her feelings only causes them to become more uncontrollable, and that it's only by embracing them that she transforms into something beautiful. An interesting theory, but one that flounders at every possible turn. You see, metaphors are intent as film criticism. They're all predicated on the idea that the creator is deliberately trying to vaguely gesture to a certain topic in the audience without directly invoking it. You're attempting to assign authorial intent to the creator and argue that this was the intention behind the work itself. This is different from applicability, where the language of a story can be applied to many different situations, even if the creator didn't intend for that to be the case or not. The themes are relevant to a variety of situations simply by virtue of shared circumstances. Now, there is an argument to be made that Frozen is applicable to a gay awakening story rather than a straight up metaphor, but we're gonna put a pin in that and come back to it later. The main issue with Frozen as a gay coming out metaphor is that Jennifer Lee flat out dispelled that idea almost immediately. Not directly, but through the use of a very common non-answer when asked about the intent behind Elsa's character arc. Jennifer Lee flat out refused to say anything concrete, saying that she wanted to leave it ambiguous and that the film belongs to the fans. How you interpret this will ultimately depend on how invested you are in Elsa being metaphorically gay. If you are invested in it, then this is an encouragement that your theory is correct. But if you're not, or you're savvy to the industry, this comes off as the dodge that it truly is. She's refusing to say anything specifically because Elsa being gay was not the intention, but it wasn't in vogue to say that in 2013. Saying you want to leave something ambiguous and that the film belongs to the fans has always been a dodge when it comes to gay content, because straight content is never left ambiguous. When Friendship is Magic ended, the final episode had a bunch of fandom pairings canonized with explicit language, while Rainbow Dash and Applejack were hinted to be in a relationship with each other, with the creators saying they wanted to make it ambiguous. But this desire for ambiguity didn't apply to Mac and Sugarbelle, who have a child, and Pinky and Cheese Sandwich, who also have a child. It was only when the gays get involved that people start getting cold feet and being subtle. Likewise in Frozen, Lee wants to leave Elsa's sexuality ambiguous, but Anna can mac on more guys in one film than any other Disney princess ever. I'm strongly of the opinion that Elsa's supposed gay awakening was not intended by the creators, and that they only made the ambiguity excuse because they feared imaginary backlash for denying it outright. And this was something that was repeated in the lead up to Frozen 2, with Jennifer Lee saying that Elsa wouldn't be getting a girlfriend because they didn't want her to be defined by her relationships. A laughable excuse for anyone who's seen the first film, because Elsa's entire character arc, and indeed the entire central theme of Frozen, is about her being defined by her relationships.
I'm scared. It's getting stronger.
Getting upset only makes it worse. Calm down.
No, don't touch me. Please. I don't want to hurt you. Do you have to go?
You'll be fine, Elsa.
I wish it could be like this all the time.
Me too.
Just stay away and you'll be safe from me. Oh, please, you'll only make it worse.
Just take care of my sister.
No, please, no.
You sacrificed yourself for me? I love you.
Elsa's entire story arc up to this point involves her being primarily defined by her relationship to her parents and her sister. Her relationships are what primarily define her as a character because, spoilers, That's how human beings work. We're social creatures. We're not supposed to be isolated. We're not supposed to be alone. We're supposed to form connections, be they many connections over a large group or a smaller number of more intimate connections. Even the most reclusive introvert has social needs that need to be met. They manifest differently, but they are there. If they didn't, quarantine wouldn't be literally driving everyone up the fucking wall right now. The notion of not wanting a Disney princess to be defined by her relationships doesn't work if you have even a rudimentary grasp of how humans work as emotional beings. I understand the backlash to compulsory heterosexual romance in films, but I find in many cases that said backlash stretches too far in the opposite direction at times, to the point of making such ridiculous statements like this and sounding more like a toddler afraid of cooties than a serious writer. If you don't know how to give Elsa a girlfriend without said romance overshadowing everything else about her as a character, you need to find a new fucking job, mate. So yeah, we can say the idea that this was an intentional metaphor is a flat no, but let's keep going because I want to walk you through a few thought experiments. So for some reason, probably idiocy, some people view Let It Go strictly as an empowerment anthem, a powerful coming out, I'm here kind of song. But in the context of the film, Elsa's shutting herself off from the world and running away from her problems. Her powers are killing the entire kingdom, and she is causing the exact kind of pain and suffering she has long been afraid of causing. Elsa is becoming the exact kind of villain she has always feared she would become. Elsa's entire story arc requires her to realize that abandoning everyone she loved was the exact opposite of what she needed to do. And the moment Anna tells her that she set off an eternal winter and is killing the people of Arendelle, her supposed freedom vanishes, and she reverts right back to conceal, don't feel, and she ends up living her very worst nightmare when she loses control of her powers and strikes Anna in the chest and then has to watch her sister freeze to death. So follow me on this one, dear viewers. If Let It Go is supposed to be an empowering coming out anthem, and Elsa ultimately learns by the end of the film that secluding herself in her fabulous ice palace was a mistake, does that mean Frozen is telling you that coming out is a mistake? Okay, but ease up. Let's add some nuance. Now I'm of the opinion that people only really listen to the line, I don't care what they're going to say, and take that as empowering. But even this line itself carries darker undertones as Elsa sinks further and further into simply not caring about anything whatsoever. She doesn't care what anyone's gonna say until Anna says, you're killing the entire kingdom. Then she cares a lot. This is where that whole applicability thing comes into play because Elsa's primary conflict is her fear and self-hatred brought about by her fear of hurting her sister and having that fear amplified by her father's scaremongering and forced isolation. And gay people, for a long time, went through a lot of fear and self-hatred as a result of compulsory heteronormativity, browbeating them into believing that their existence was somehow evil or sinful. But that's where the similarities end. Self-hatred can come from many forms, and sexuality is only one of the ways in which it can manifest. It'd be more fair to say that Elsa's story is applicable to anyone who has ever had to deal with guilt or self-loathing, regardless of where they manifest. And I feel this is ultimately where LGBT people felt the story resonated with them. Not so much a gay coming out metaphor, but as a far more general self-loathing story, which is a far more reasonable opinion to have of the film. Besides, if we were to read Elsa's story as a gay coming out metaphor, then we'd have to ignore the entire prologue that demonstrates where Elsa's fear and self-loathing originates from. Speaking of which, let's get cursed. Okay, so if we were to read Elsa's story explicitly as a gay coming out metaphor, what does that say about the fact that all of her fears and insecurities center around her little sister, the only other woman in the story? See, we can argue about authorial intent or the actual context of a scene, but this right here is where any idea of Frozen as a gay coming out metaphor dies a grisly death, because the story is centered almost entirely around familial love, and Anna and Elsa are the only two significant female characters in the entire story. You simply cannot make a gay metaphor stick organically into the text of the film, because trying to do that will upend the surface level story. It's important to remember that stories have a plot, and the plot is not just a vector for 1,000 metaphors. I know this is hard to grapple with because public school never lets its students read anything that isn't dripping in symbolism and written like the deranged ramblings of a crackhead smearing their shit on the walls, but most stories don't have a metaphor. Most stories are pretty straightforward, and stories that have metaphors tend not to have metaphors that completely contradict the actual story. You can say this is a gay coming out metaphor until you're blue in the face, but all of Elsa's self-hatred and self-loathing is centered directly around Anna. She is the catalyst for everything that happens in the film. Elsa is terrified of hurting her. She's terrified of Anna finding out. Anna's pushiness is what causes her outburst, and Anna being hurt by her is her worst nightmare that causes her to break down in absolute despair by the end of the film. To say this is all about Elsa being gay is to tacitly suggest that Elsa is in love with her sister. Now, admittedly, Frozen doesn't really handle the dialogue between Elsa and Anna very well. It's clumsy, it's awkwardly written, and crosses paths with the film's desire to maintain 2 Act 3 misdirections at all times. To put it bluntly, sometimes the dialogue and animation between Elsa and Anna accidentally sounds romantic. This has been a criticism since the film released. In one particularly notorious example, Anna reacts to Hans by being flustered, babbling, and talking about how beautiful she thinks he is, and in the very next scene, Anna reacts to Elsa in the exact same way.
This is awkward. Not you're awkward, but just because I'm awkward. You're gorgeous. Wait, what? You look beautiful. Thank you. You look beautifuler. I mean, not fuller. You don't look fuller, but more beautiful.
But the thing about dialogue flubs like this is that it's accidental. Nobody sets out to make their films sound like this on purpose. They do it because they tried to do something else and failed. And awkward dialogue is a staple of Jennifer Lee's films already. Wreck-It Ralph had awkwardness for days, but that's the thing. Accidental flubs are not meant to be taken seriously, but it seems Frozen's fanbase didn't get that memo. Yeah, I didn't break into this topic just for shits and giggles because the connection between the idea of Elsa's story as a gay metaphor and what that would tacitly say about Elsa's relationship to her sister wasn't actually lost on a lot of people, and a very large segment of Frozen's fanbase went absolutely batshit fucking bonkers with it. I apologize for the knowledge that I'm about to curse you with, but I've seen some shit in preparation for this video and I refuse to suffer alone. Anna and Elsa aren't only the most popular pairing among the fanbase, but many of the elements we talked about in this video so far are actively applied to it in fanworks. It's very common in fanworks for Elsa to not only be infatuated with her sister, but to battle with self-hatred and self-loathing for it. In some form or another, self-hatred is a consistent theme here. It's not uncommon for the cursed ship to exist either alongside or in place of the events of the actual film. And because of this trifecta of bad takes, a lot of people are insistent that Disney must be shipping it as well. I mean, it just makes sense, right? They would go to all this effort to craft a gay coming out metaphor and have no other women in the story if they weren't, right? That's what people actually suggest, that the film was intentionally going for all of this, and this is the core fallacy at play. I know your English teachers tried so hard to tell you otherwise, but not everything in a story is 100% intentional. People aren't flawless at writing like that. Stories fuck up, they fumble things, they mess up relationships, writers rush things, they don't check their work, they have personal failings that mean the story was doomed on arrival, they're writing something they simply have no experience with, the audience is on fucking Quaaludes. Like, remember those people who thought The Last Jedi was about Rey's sexual awakening? Yeah, no, it wasn't. Reylos are just fucking deranged. There are so many factors that can cause a story to go off the rails. If everything was truly intentional, bad films and shows and games wouldn't fucking exist because nobody sets out to make a bad story on purpose. They try to make a good story and fail. Frozen isn't a gay coming out metaphor. It's a story that is explicitly about self-hatred and isolation that just happened to be applicable to LGBT people. The film doesn't encourage Elsana, it's just a story about familial love that fucked up some dialogue and animation along the way, as is expected at this point from the director. If you seriously think that Disney would make their actual first gay character also have an incestuous infatuation, please do the rest of the world a favor and continue staying in quarantine even after the pandemic is over, because the thought of catching whatever brainworms you have scares the ever-loving shit out of me. Why am I talking about this? Well, professional obligations, but also because I found that a general attitude among a lot of people is that creators can do no wrong, that everything is 100% intentional, and a read of something that wasn't intentional is just people being absurd, that if something wasn't intentional, it's pointless to bring it up. But unfortunate implications are a very real thing. Creators aren't perfect, they fuck things up. As much as I support the idea that Frozen being a gay coming out metaphor isn't intentional, that's largely to dispel the idea that they did intend to do that. But as I already detailed, many other implications people read from the film is simply the result of an honest mishandling of dialogue. It's a funny joke at Jennifer Lee's expense because, lol, she doesn't know how estranged sisters talk. I think in general we could all do to learn that creators sometimes stumble, creators fuck things up, creators let their biases run away with them, and just because you technically know what they intended doesn't mean we should pretend those fuck-ups either weren't there or were secretly intentional. Do you want cursed ships? Because that's how you get cursed ships.